Thank you to all the Patreons, firstly, and moreover, if you could subscribe, like, and share this video, and if you have anything to add to this, please provide a comment. Destruction is brought forth by the crystallization of potential. When one turns from the unconscious path of I will become to the conscious path of I am, then one will only find perdition at the end of such a path. Self-ruin awaits those who cannot adapt and be like the water rather than the rock. Rigidity absorbs the stampede of chaos, eventually bending to its incessancy, while flexibility seeks to become the chaos and thus embodies the immortal nature of the truth of this all. This is the quintessence of the cycle, where life moves from the possibilities of youth to the calcification of the zenith and twilight of adulthood, the movement from potential to actualization, the operation of phantasmic entelechy. This is the negation of being that brings forth the determinate reality of existence. The latter is of a temporal essence because it is artificial in comparison to its progenitor, that of being, and the former is the mean of truth that maintains its inertia through the volatile oscillations of eternal time. Kronos is the I am, for he straddles that centre of the present moment, and is thus he who is between the thresholds and controls the thresholds, the god of time and the god of thresholds, of confinement, corralling of the human livestock, and of the beginning and the end, or the aleph and the tav. Interestingly, the rolling out of the needlecrafts occurred exactly in the midst of the aleph-tav eclipse, which was a period of 6 years, 6 months, 6 weeks, and 6 days. The halfway point of that being 3 years, 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days. Hence December 14th, 2020, or the onset of the needlecrafts, was the timely centre of the thresholds of Janus, the janitor, where we get that term from, meaning gatekeeper, or he who guards the doorways. Again, linking to this ferryman or psychopomp nature of Saturn, of Kronos, of Yahweh himself, the 7th planet. In classical astronomy, it is the outer ring, the patient one, the marker of time. Again, if you were to view it as the hands of the clock, it is that which draws the clock in its circular motion, right? On the outside of the face of the clock. This is the Lord of the Rings. That is Saturn. That is Kronos. That is Choronzom, Yaldabaoth. Choronzom itself comes from or it's said to come from the Enochian root of Kor, which means to count. Again, this idea of time, this idea of mathematics, quantification, a scientific reductionism in terms of that materialistic outlook that we see all too readily within science. It is pervasive within science, of course, due to the scientific method. As we see with Janus, the god of thresholds, the needlecraft was the onset of Kronos, or Saturn, or, of course, Yahweh, the first to call himself king, hence Corona, the central theme of the present and eternal privation of time. That was the centre between the Tav eclipse of 2017, the beginning of the end of the West, and the Aleph eclipse of 2024, or the beginning of the dawn of a new age or new world order. The eternal before and the eternal after, with the vanishing and imperceptible moment of the present being that of time, that which holds the embers of the dark past and the spark of the dark future yet to come. If the needlecraft was emblematic of Kronos, then what other indicators do we see of his presence? Well, the Corona V, I can't say that V word, but you understand what I'm inferring, is the Latin for literally crown poison. The Proto-Basileus, or the first king, Kronos or Saturn, thus coronated his arrival with that of the harvest of the plague. The corona was placed once again upon the awakened king, still rising fully from his slumber, to be ever digitized and manifested within programmatic code as the Lord of all things that shall rule over the internet of all things, by which, of course, the powers that shouldn't be desire for us to be completely merged into that system biodigitally. This is what we call biodigital convergence. To add further weight to this, we find that the term epidemic derives from the ancient Greek epidemia, and bearing one of the potential etymologies of arrival in the country, with the suffix of pan-epidemic, pan meaning all or the world, and its abbreviation of pandemic, subsequently meaning arrival in the world. Thus, the 2020 event and the needlecraft was the arrival of the first king to the world once again, Saturn or Aquarius. Additionally, in the astrological sense, on November 5th, 2019, Jupiter and its malefic aspect conjoined Saturn in Coda Draconis, the tail of the serpent, and the geomantic figure of the south node of the moon, and the element of fire. It is a sign that portends terrible things to come, and is associated with both Saturn and Mars. And I want to state as well, the tail of the serpent in alchemical lore is linked to the wingless wyvern or drake, right? What that is it's in essence the volatile aspect of the metal of Mercury. Now, Mercury is this, it is the universal symbol of the inherent transformative power at the center of all creation, that which maintains creation, or the artificial nature of it. So this is this notion of both death and life are but reflections of this transformative Mercury, if you will, right? They are mutually complementary paradoxes. They support one another, they're co-interdependence. You see this a lot throughout perception management, psychological warfare. I mean, the list goes on. It really can be boiled down very succinctly into the constellate of problem, reaction, solution, or thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, right? The thesis and antithesis are mere camera obscuras, or inverted reflections. The light and the shadow that it casts of the synthesis. So the synthesis is always there. It's just that the dialectic of the thesis and antithesis, the problem and reaction, are just consistently maintaining it. Almost like the refresh rate on a TV, or the negative feedback loop of a never-ending eternal cycle. It constantly maintains the balance. It maintains the equilibrium. It maintains us within the confines of the wheel. That is what it is designed to do. This is the same notion that's really tied up in the Sator magic square, Sator repotenitor opera rotas, which, if you do a bit of digging, and I put all of this in my, I've put it in my new book, Leave the World Behind, an esoteric analysis. It's elaborated upon extensively in the book that I'm going to release called An Empire of Corruption, Mythology Revisited. And I also have it contained in Yahweh is Satan, the genesis of a new order of the ages. And this video will actually tie into a video that I'm going to do on this meme that is constantly repeated by Trump and has now been seeded into the zeitgeist. And it is this notion of the golden age of America. And he constantly reiterates it. Well, to cut a long story short, it basically is echoing mythology. The golden age of Saturn. Look it up. Look it up. I will cover it in fairly extensive detail. Again, all of that is in Leave the World Behind, an esoteric analysis. It will also be less so on the Golden Age, but it's touched upon anyway in the new book I'm writing right now, and I touch upon it in Yahweh is Satan. The reason for that is because Yahweh, Saturn, and Kronos are all very much, both, archetypally, deifically, they're all connected. Even in terms of their symbolism, actually. They're very much connected along those lines too. They parallel one another in very strange, peculiar, and you could say perennial ways. So those books touch upon that. But I will cover an abridged version of that, and of course a visual and audio form, with the Golden Age of America video that I will do after this one. But this really sets the stage for what I'm going to discuss in that video. I mean, you have to understand these key metaphysical and meta-narrative points, because it is so vitally important to what is occurring right now, what is occurring within Abrahamism, Kabbalah, the idea of the Tikkun. It's all tying into this, essentially this New Age paradigm, and the emergence of an elite that are hell-bent on recreating the vision of creation in their own image, to mark themselves as gods, to baptize themselves before the digital eye of providence. I mean, it's really ramping up to this idea of the Aquarian age, which traditionally, you guessed it, was under the sign of Saturn. Under the sign of Saturn. The water pourer, Aquarius, or the water bearer. And again, him pouring out the water from the vessel, which he's typically illustrated as doing, is this Kabbalistic notion of the Sheveret HaKalim, which literally means the shattering of the vessels. It is the descending of the wisdom of the crown, or the Keter, again there's the corona, in a very serpentine or lightning bolt pattern. Hence, for example, in pop culture, David Bowie, who was a Kabbalist, by the way, you saw his Starman character, that persona, that alter ego that he embodied, that was all tied up in that ritualism surrounding the Sheveret HaKalim. Of course, as well, David Bowie had several songs, they're obscure B-sides, I believe. They're very obscure songs, before he became more popular in the 1980s and the late 70s. And it discusses, I believe it's called The Supermen, and it discusses this idea of the Loveless Isle, and essentially, cutting a long story short, the Saturnian Golden Age. That's what it discusses, before the fall from grace, that we have lost some sort of ancient wisdom, and we must reclaim it. Now, I will touch upon this in the Golden Age video, and I don't really have to say much other than this ties in with the Amorites, or the Babylonians, right? Again, as I covered in my book Blood on the Sand, I show conclusively that the Amorites, the Hyksos, and then eventually the Israelites are all one and the same. They're connected. Totally connected. They all worshipped the Lord in, of course, varying names, but eventually they all abbreviated this worship to the Lord. They all venerated this Lord character. He who brought order to chaos via the sword, via war, via prescribed chaos, if you will. Again, this is all very Saturnian, very Cronian, very Yahwishan. So what I'm showing is, this is not just one group. This agenda isn't just one group. It is something that is an infection. It has literally came from the abyss of the unconscious. It has traversed the liminal barriers of the psyche, and it has taken root in the minds of men. It has, like a parasite, sought for men to project it like an egregore, a psychic or a psychospiritual infection upon the very canvas of reality. It is like that which is dead, seeking to be reanimated by necromantic means. Of course, that has become, digital in essence, programmatic in its structure, this sort of digital necromancy, and it's trying to manifest and bring life to essentially this techno-tyrant of time, the god of technocracy, the god of the managerialist, the false god who sees humans as nothing more than mere material things, and he seeks to establish that culture in their mind, to bring them into those predictable patterns of mass consumer behaviour, of a type of pernicious hyper-atheism, you could call it. And of course, Aquarius is the age of man, right? It is the age of man. It's where man seeks to elevate himself as God. He becomes almost possessed, in no small part, by this egregore of the child of chaos, Yaldabaoth, Yaldabaoth, the demiurge, or Choronzom, the dweller of the abyss. It is almost like a type of apophaenia, right? Where one sees patterns where there are none. Or pareidolia, right? Picking out patterns from seemingly unrelated, yet to one's perception, to one's mind, one's consciousness. You establish connections in these unrelated things. It seems to be a phenomenon that's completely, inseparable from the psyche, from the psychological behaviour of man. And what we have done with that is we have looked into the scrying mirror, and we have made within this scrying mirror this connection between our conscious mind and our unconscious. We have illuminated this darkness of the unconscious, and thus we've illuminated all of the potential shadows within it, because it's the shadows within this world that provide man power. It is that which is the I will become. It is the unconscious path, as opposed to the conscious path of the I am. It is that potency that the men of power and ambition cling to. So they go in league, they convene with the darker, more malefic aspects of the spiritual world, the powers and principalities. And of course, this cosmic battle, this cosmo-psychic battle, is occurring both within us and as an immanent force within everything. It is a battle between good and evil, and everything in between. It is this tug of war that we find ourselves as humans locked in the midst of. And each side, both consciously and unconsciously, seek to vie for our soul. They want us, they pitch their ideas, they pitch their selling points, and they want us to join this side or that side. Now, of course, the wise man will always choose the middle path. That is not the path of neutrality. That is the path of temperance, where you understand both are but a reflection of one another. They are an illusion, in essence, and that the good path lies in the middle, between both the tyrant and the rebel. Man has a tendency of overcorrection. He has a tendency to look into the unconscious, again with apophenia or pareidolia as his companion, and he tries to pull from the unconscious the pure potential, undifferentiated and unmanifested, narrow and very short-sighted patterns, which he then takes, represses its potency, represses its chaotic potential, and then labels it as order. And this is why civilizations never last. It's because man dabbles with a type of black, dark light fire that he is not well versed in, even though he may believe he is. He doesn't understand the intrinsic qualities and nature of this chaos that he deals with. Almost like a Solomonic figure trying to bend spirits, demones, to his will. It never works out for man. Never. And this is why the mean reversion always sends us back to the Dark Age, because what precedes the Age of Fire, the age of that potency of the unconscious, of the abyss of pure potential, and by abyss I mean the deep waters, that sort of imagery. What precedes that will always be an age of darkness, because abundance and prosperity always comes at the cost of another's deprivation and hardship. Nothing in this world is free. Nothing. The golden age that they desire will come of the toil, sweat, blood, and slaughter of innocence, unaware of these grander cosmic cycles and this grander stage performance of the elites that is happening in their midst. And of course many play an unwitting part in, because they just seek to survive. Another thing to mention as well, this geomantic figure of the south node of the moon and the element of fire. This idea of the moon and fire is literally the hermaphrodite, the rebus, the double matter. What you're seeing there is similar to the Lover Tarot, or even the Strength Tarot card. And what it is the fusion, you could say blasphemous fusion, of the male and female energy, of life and death. In terms of our own current political and social paradigm, it would be the total monopolization of both the creation of life and the inflicting of death by a minority, elite, right? By the werewolf class, if you will. Those who stalk the villagers and one by one diminish their number. Again, unknown to the villagers. And that is why it is a sign that portends terrible things to come and is associated with both Saturn and Mars. You're going through the violent alchemical transmutation of the world. Something, by the way, that should be a personal thing. The alchemical transformation occurs personally. It is the spiritual journey, quite literally. The fool's journey, the hero's journey. The journey from hell, or from the abode of the Lord of the earth, back to heaven, back to our true spiritual home. They've taken that, they've twisted it sacrilegiously, and in their demented fervour, they've turned it into a literal global happening that those who resist this global happening, this violent global alchemical transmutation from a world of nation states to a world that is ruled solely by a messianic monarch, that, as the Zohar states, all those who resist it will be forced into it, into accepting, into bending the knee, paying homage to this new system. That global turmoil will be induced to bring them into this new system. So that should tell you everything you need to know about this worldly clique who are desirous of this global monarchy, this never-ending world dominion. Carrying on, and from this we began to witness the emergence of a particular V, again I can't mention that word, upon the world stage that spread quickly and rapidly, or so the narrative went. 12 days later, the number of the signs of the zodiac was the first likely case of Coof-19 in a meat market in Wuhan, China. Of note too, the first usage of the word pandemic was in 1666. That was the same year, by the way, that Sabbatai Zivi was on the go, but we'll get to that. Used to describe continuously spreading diseases in a country. That was the same year as the Great Fire of London. By the way, these Great Fire events, as I mentioned in my video on the LA fires, this is something that happens all the time, by the way. It is a primary tactic of this clique. That was the same year as the Great Fire of London and the false messiah, Sabbatai Zvi, claiming that he was the messiah, of course, reaching his height, and claimed that the messianic era began, along with his proclamation of the redemption through sin mantra, a variant of Ordo Abikeo, of course. It must be noted too that 1666 was the 666th year of the second millennium, and the 66th year of the 17th century, and it was the first year to be designated by the Latin descriptor of Annus Mirabilis, or the Marvellous Year, by John Dryden in a poem of the same name. Interestingly, the last great epidemic of the bubonic plague in England ended in 1666, with it beginning approximately a year prior in 1665. So, digressing, the quotidian stress and daily struggles, born with the spirit and radiating outwards, is a mark of our titanic nature, our nature born of the scattering of the source through its own divergence into space, then its separation into fractals which birthed time by its consequent iterative scope, depression, substance abuse, and the inability for us to regulate our own behaviour beyond the control of our basal needs and repress predatory tendencies are all manifestations of a form of possession, an exhibiting of a mysterious and putrescent shadow's power over us. Furthermore, I also contend that these are stark indications, if I may be so bold, of the rise of the dead into this plane of existence. The society in which we reside within is a hellscape, an abode of the damned and diseased, the epitome of madness and a true bazaar of the bizarre. We sit around, us who can still reason, within this barren dust bowl populated by maladapted quasi-intellectuals, and ponder as to what has truly gone wrong with society. Woe unto us, for what terrible crime we must have committed to be born into such a tenebrous time. To this thought, we torture ourselves endlessly. Of course, we may observe that, in many ways, this place and time is also a godsend, for it is the greatest school one can find study within. In this spirit, as Carl Jung once remarked, no tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. As Gustav Meyrink wrote in his work, The White Dominican, quote, "They have released the shades from Hades and brought them to life with a demonic force, so that men will believe that the resurrection of the dead has come," unquote. To what he speaks of here relates precisely to Revelation 20:13. Quote, "The sea gave up the dead that were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them, and each person was judged according to what they had done," unquote. As Iamblichus believed, one of the crucial reasons for ritual and theurgy and its accompanying symbols was to establish internal and external to oneself repositories for the containing of energia, energy. It may also be described that this energia, or energy, is also married to the nature of the human psyche, an indistinguishable element of it, for the cosmic and transcendent energy can only find manifestation and existence through the condensing of the psyche, and this is why all that exists will continually seek lower and lower vibrational states. Of course, once it hits a certain maturation of descent, then it will traject upwards. It will seek the upper. Once it goes upwards, it transcends, then it will hit a maturation of transcendence and descend back down once again. This is what establishes the oscillations of existence. Alas, it may be said that the more disconnected we are from the natural tempo of the world and our ancestors, then the more they shall haunt our thoughts and beckon us insistently to acknowledge their presence and honour their memory. Therefore, one could say that the dead do remain and return to haunt the living through their very psyche. A perturbation of the metaphysics of the society is induced by the deceased cells of the given social organism. This perturbation and haunting manifests itself through neuroses, illnesses, and rampant substance and carnal abuses. No generation in the history of man has been more psychologically and spiritually disturbed than the generation we now abide within. What some refer to as Generation Z, the generation of Z, or 26, the value of the tetragrammaton of Yahweh, and hence Generation Z, is the generation that shall manifest the Demiurgos, Ahriman, Yahweh, or Sabaoth, etc. We must truly ponder, why is this generation so terminally ill, and afflicted with all manner of mental and spiritual malady? How can one have all of this technology, hence ostensible convenience, and yet still be drawn to the death spiral of self-deprecating behaviours? We must ask ourselves why. To what cause can we conclude this all born of? I believe the metaphysical or spiritual explanation provides a far more precise view on the probable causal root of these aforesaid maladies. We must of course make mention of too, that this spiritual explanation finds anchors of explanation in the physical world. These anchors that I speak of are quite clearly found within the scrying mirrors. This is what was used to communicate with the unconscious, to establish that psychic portal between this world, the conscious and waking world, and the Kur, the underworld, Hades, the land of the dead, of the unconscious, who seek, like an undead shade, a hungry ghost, never satiated, to return back to the land of the living, the realm of consciousness. They desire what we have, so they fool us into believing they can provide us with magician's tricks, They can provide us with the Promethean flame. They can provide us with the tablet of destiny. But of course, this is the Faustian bargain. And we are living proof that the Faustian bargain will always lead to the Faustian demise. Digressing, the festival of the Cronia, or Saturnalia, and its celebration of the golden age of Kronos' rule, or Saturn's rule, was distinguished by luxurious overabundance in combination with an innate hedonistic and hubristic sense of freedom and equality at all costs, impossible equality. Both freedom and equality are the gifts of the reign of Kronos, of Saturn, those gifts that eventually sour the recipients and turn them into pawns for a grander, cosmic play of fate. This is what the Hindus, the Dharmic religions, the Vedic peoples knew as the Leela. And of course, the Leela in the Sumerian or Akkadian worlds are the Lilu, which are the demons of the air, the spirits of the air, the evil spirits of the air, right? Of course, Satan is known as the Prince of Air, I do believe, in the New Testament. I think it's remarked, well, this idea of the Prince of the Air is remarked upon within the Old Testament too. But, interestingly, this is where the term Lilith comes from. And in Israelite or Judaic Hebrew tradition, the Lilitu or the Liliths were not just it wasn't just a singular entity, but it was its own class of spirits. Again, some were evil, some were not, but they all vied for ambition, power, continuing on. In this regard, one is given an absolute and unerring sense of freedom, and in the same vein, they are struck by the incessancy of total chaos and criminality. Indeed, one may remark that, with the powers of the cosmos, there is no blessing granted without the travails of a repercussive, heavy price. This constitutes the hidden and unforeseen cost that lurks beneath the Saturnian veil. Of equal import, it must be stressed that due to the contradictory nature of the archetype of time, known by many names, then apocalyptic and hellish images are populated throughout the transitional period, leading his crowning aeon in Aquarius. The instability of this archetype's quintessence brings forth the prevailing of instability. A glimpse at the true nature of the most violent and destructive of weapons, that being time, and the jarring creations born of such a gauntlet to run. The king of primeval chaos may only bring forth such vexation. The king of primeval chaos is the only one powerful enough to bring forth such vexations that we find ourselves within today. Indeed, it is the overturning of the default pattern of the chaos camp, the struggle against chaos, that we see the patriarchal head of the pantheon, the symbol of order, cutting at and eviscerating the ensnarement of the world by chaos. By contrast, the reverence of Saturn, Kronos and Yahweh, or other shades of this archetype who fashioned the tyranny of time, is established by the inversion of the chaos camp. In this Saturn, Kronos, or Yahweh, this archetype of time, created chaos to thus bring forth order. The perceptive reader will understand the connection here with the Masonic motto of Ordo ab Chao, and assuredly one may conclude that this is where the grand architects chosen derived such a metaphysical observation from. As Tertullian remarked, echoing far more ancient Egyptian prophecies regarding the aeon of Aquarius, the age of Aquarius, the rebirth of the kingdom of Saturn, Kronos, or Yahweh. Quote, Humble ones are raised, high ones are brought down, harbouring the seeds of a topsy-turvy world on the brink of catastrophe, where justice becomes a rarity. The natural shapes are replaced by monsters. The Western man, or whatever man that shall be born out of this trying crucible of this age, will be a man born of fire and sharpened like steel, and resistant to the managerial philosophy of postmodernity. It shall be a man that shall crave war as a way to carve out his own destiny, a spiritual man that is aware of his own mortality and puts his allotted time to good use, and a man who will be physically and mentally acute. This is what this era shall produce, and eras akin to this shall always produce. Yes, we live in bad times, but they are needed to thus lead to the good. A contrived Caesar figure shall arise, possibly from the political class. Again, all of this shall be contrived, and they shall set our world aflame. Unfortunately, it is only by this that the house of cards collapses, and the veil of illusion is burned away, revealing the truth of our system. This is the way in which renewal comes forth, as the majority are too tied to not losing what they have. She saw how tall the grasses danced, so beautifully in the wind, and she chose that for her own life, to stand tall and yet still be moved in the presence of invisible things. Thank you, and thank you to all the Patreons who support this channel and make this possible, including those who buy my book. Even just watch these videos and comment, like, subscribe. It really does help, and I am forever in your debt, and I greatly appreciate the time that you provide to me in listening to these monologues. And I hope, as is always what I hope when I make these videos and diligently go about my work, is that I can impart some sort of value to you. Not that I can provide you rigid and concrete absolutist principles that you should abide by as some sort of commandment of truth. No, that's not what I seek. The way I structure these videos, these monologues, the way I talk to you, is from the point of view of an observer. And I seek to convey to you, to perhaps imprint upon your soul, the same fire and zest I have for life, and for the mysteries of life, for the awe-inspiring mysteries of life. And I hope that the conflagration of this inspiration, the flame of that, can be passed on like beacons upon the mountains that we light together to signal the dawning of an era that is born free from the shackles of slavery. Thank you.